There are so many anime that come out every season that are terribly generic and have a plot that you have seen a million times. But this has potential. Anyone who subscribes to this channel knows that I'm a rabid manga reader. So, all the way back in 2022, in a tired and semi-delirious state fueled by way too much Mango Loco and just a tad of bipolar, I found myself poring over a fantasy manga that had been recommended to me on the premise of no isekai, just fun. I wasn't exactly convinced with such a vague recommendation, but I plunged in nonetheless. What I found was a story that followed a well-trod formula. A story that we'd all seen before. An MC who can't use magic. He's bullied by his peers, but he still strives upwards. He strives for greatness. He uses swords. They use magic. I can hear you now. You're already calling it. No, this video isn't about bloody Black Clover. What? No, this is about Wistoria, Wand and Sword, a series from an author that I'm already on the record as utterly loathing. That author being the writer of Danmachi, Is It Wrong to Pick Up Girls in the Dungeon? As I began to read, I found myself charmed. This wasn't as generic a romp as I was expecting from the premise alone, but this actually isn't a recommendation video for the manga. No. This is about how the anime excellently adapted the first chapter into a visually luscious, not to mention entertaining, debut episode, and thus hooked many who may have otherwise never have had interest in such a series with such a generic premise. But why and how did the first episode feel so good to me as a manga reader? Let's be real, 9 times out of 10 when things I like get adapted, the adaptation is horrible. Please don't make me think about what happened to Ranger Reject. After all, so many anime adaptations lose all the nuance of tone and atmosphere once on screen, mostly due to careless direction or uninspired approaches. And yet, the first episode of Wistoria managed to capture quiet moments just as well as the moments of tension, drama, and action. To make my case today, I'll only be discussing the first chapter and episode, breaking it down into these 3 categories of things that stood out to me most, and how they made this such an enjoyable debut. So often, when we talk about animation styles and approaches, we are overwhelmed by yelling about flashy battles and cool, hardcore, badass fights. But to me, there's always something so alluring about the ability to convey personality and behavior through animation alone. When you look at low quality anime, you tend to notice that the first thing that's lost is this character animation. Like, look at this scene from Fuka's anime adaptation. In comparison to something like Hyoka, it's just so lifeless. But when we look at this Wistoria episode, we see an array of delicate and attentive moments that set it apart from some of its contemporaries, both in this season and in the last few. Like, look at this shot of Will fist bumping with Kiki, his familiar, or this one, where Will appreciates the beauty of the day. Looking at these sorts of quiet scenes with Will, it allows us to see him not only as a gentle soul, but also for his slightly awkward but sweet nature, despite the bullying he's endured. From his unconsciously flirty behaviour with Colette to his extracurricular relationship with Werkner, we see who Will is not only through the way that he speaks and communicates with other individuals, but also through the smallest movements, his body language and expressions. There's something that brings out so much in anime, which have the courage to use detailed character animation in addition to just battle animation. Sure, it's usually a staple of slice of life anime, and usually you see it the most in advanced productions like movies, think Makoto Shinkai, right? But it really does give so much depth to a series that otherwise might just be fine. Wistoria gets this huge step up just for this alone for me. As I mentioned before, Wistoria started off on really rocky ground for me, especially because its core concept was something that we've seen so many authors do before. And that's to say, you wouldn't be entirely wrong to call it a Black Clover clone, just for how similar the concept is alone. Of course, when you follow in that vein, you then have to do something that makes you stand out. Initially, I'd argue that simply, it's the visual aspect of Wistoria's manga that makes it look utterly stunning in contrast with some of its other magic versus non-magic contemporaries. So when it came to the screen, that would have to immediately be angle number one. And let me tell you, when I saw the simplified character design sheets, my blood ran cold. After all, too often, bad character sheets can be a prelude of what's to come. But oh boy, was I wrong. Not only do the character designs look consistently great throughout this debut, they also look great in simple scenes and the more dramatic battle scenes. Sure, the design for the monster in the dungeon is simplified a bit, but the atmosphere conveyed by the intimidating animation is more than enough to make up for it. Even the way the backgrounds are constructed made my jaw drop. While watching the first episode with Pack, I had to lavish praise upon it for the clever use of 3D space and objects to create a depth to Werkner's office, and that's a praise I stand by. And it's across the board. This is a beautiful first episode, utterly beautiful. Okay, I hear you, fine, let's stop tap dancing around the issue. The action here is the standout. The action here is nothing less than fucking sick, awesome, cool, right? We blend in Will not necessarily being an overpowered character, he's strong, not overpowered. And we do this by showing him heavily out of breath, using risky combat maneuvers like rolls and desperate flips to keep out of harm's way. And then you add to that his actual offensive capabilities, and it makes the fight with the evil Sentinel a perfect illustration of why so many of us, even those who prefer the quieter side of things, will always have a little awe in our hearts for fantastic action animation. And then we get into the sheer weight of this fight. When we see Will landing blows, it genuinely feels like he's throwing his all into it, especially when we cast it against the flaccid magic that Shion used against the Sentinel. Once Will recovers from his moment of doubt, we see everything we love to see from a sword wielder: sliced off fingers and arms, spurts of blood, and then we finally top it off with his absolutely giga meathead favourite move of stealing a giant sword and bisecting an enemy with it. Even me, romance aficionado that I am, was left agog. But man, there's something about this episode's action scenes that bring me back to 2014 when I first re-engaged with Naruto. Pounding through the anime, pounding through the manga, and just reveling in the fights, the intensity and action of the medium. Obviously this excitement was dulled by the sheer amount of filler. However, it gave me so much joy. And just the other day, I was praising that goofy Osan anime for having the kind of meatheadedness I want when I want to unwind. But adapting and bringing Wistoria from page to screen this well has more than scratched the itch of what I'm looking for. And sure, it may be up against stiff competition this season, with such gleaming productions as Elusive Samurai and Season 2 of Oshi no Ko, but if they keep up this sort of quality, I will be as happy as a clam in high tide. In finishing, Wistoria really captures what you need to do to make a shonen action fantasy work. You need a solid foundation with characters who are not only likable, but who draw you in with the promise of their future arcs. You also need animation to draw in the more casual audience, otherwise it'll slip right by. But most importantly, and I cannot emphasize this enough, you need some big fucking swords!